Everyone gathered in the secret room.
みんな大丈夫なのですか？はわお、監視カメラを見てましたのです。敵は多分30人くらいいますのです。
そんなにかよ。やってくれるぜ。
ちょっとスイッチをいじるよ。連中立ち往生してるよ。
When Mion touched a switch, the screen switched to the view of the entrance to the basement. Some of the mountain dogs were checking out the door. They didn't appear to be trying to force it open. They were simply at a loss for what to do.
向こうはどう打って出るでしょう。こっちを袋のネズミと思ってますもの。多分大勢で体当たりでもして。
Isn't there like a secret escape route that goes down the well, like murder pit?
なんだこいつら、丸太なんか持ってきて。
どうやらあれで扉を打ち破ろうとしているようです。
今サトコが袋のネズミだと言いました。なら相手が扉を開けようと苦闘している間にここを脱出するべきだと思います。
同感です。それに富武さんも助け出さないと。
そうだね。いくらここの壁が厚くても敵に見つかったら価値はないと思う。レナも脱出する時だと思うな。
おねえ、この状況ならもうとっくに警察に電話できる段階じゃありません？だねえ、一番最初の市民の権利を忘れてたよ。仮に警察のスパイに電話を聞かれたとしても、もうこの段階ではバレバレだしね。大石さんが駆けつけてくれるはずさ。
Mion picked up the phone. Why hadn't she thought about this earlier?
あれ
Is it dead?
どうした？
Mion panicked as she tried to listen for a dial tone. Yeah, they cut the lines.
なんで？うんともすんとも言わない。
ケーブルが切られたかもしれません。
Yep, suddenly everything went dark.
なんだろう、停電？
Kasai lit his cigarette lighter, and Mion turned her emergency flashlight on.
地下の弱点を突かれたね。でもこれだけ暗ければ敵だって簡単には。わかんないけど、多分暗闇でも見える機械
Like
と
a
かあるんじゃない？
flashlight? Or night vision, presumably.
持ってそうよね、あの連中。
This time, would they have night vision at this point? I'm not entirely sure. It might have been like a new cutting-edge technology at this time. Which, if that was the case, they could have.
ミオンさん、どうして敵は電気を切断しましたの？ただの嫌がらせ？
嫌がらせ以上の意味があるとすれば、ここのセキュリティを殺すこと。
あいつら扉を撫でてましたの。諦めたんじゃない。あっという間に壊す方法を持ってて、それを気づかれないためにカメラを壊そうと。それで電気を切ったんじゃ。
まさか爆破する気？
ってことは扉は一瞬で破られて、ここにもう砦の価値はねえってことじゃねえのか？
Or maybe that's what they want you to think.
みーちゃん、今すぐにここを脱出しよう。さっき言ってた核シードの脱出口を教えて。こっちです、みんな。
It's actually pretty lucky that they're not surrounding the property. Not that they could, but that they're not. Because this will potentially give us a chance to get away without them noticing. At least at first. Mion was getting confused amidst all the chaos. She hadn't underestimated the mountain dogs. She even considered that they would have some explosives. But she didn't think that they would use them in Hinamizawa in broad daylight. Somebody will hear the explosion. Is there even such a thing as a silent explosive?
荒っぽい連中なんだろう。多少の危険は顧みないのかもしれな
I
いぜ。
mean, there's definitely something going on that they're banking on here. I feel like it has something to do with the festival, but I'm not sure.
確かにこんな時代ですが、山犬は非常に慎重な奴らです。こんな真っ昼間に爆弾なんて。高野さんならともかく、あのお好みさんが許可するはずがない。
それでもぶち抜こうってのかい。いい度胸だよ。
ルナはわかんないんだけど、音がしない鉄砲があるように音がしない爆弾ってあるの？
ないです。どんな爆弾もみんな似たような音がします。
そうか、わかりましたわ。
Not
奴
if
ら
it's
の偉い
underwater.
監
Maybe.
督は綿流しの本部役員ですわよね。今日の祭り、雨天延期の判断は？
確か今日の10時に決まって。あ、
まさか運動会と同じで。
木を隠すには森ってことね。
Rika knew Okonagi well. He would always complain about how he had to guard her like she was a princess. Rika had never expected Okonagi to be so sharp. That was why she was more frustrated than anyone else. The mountain dogs had quickly set explosives on the basement door. Long wires were connected to the explosives, and the mountain dogs were waiting at the other end, lying flat on the ground. One of the members was holding a detonation switch. All the wires were linked to it.
もうじき10時です。今朝連中に先生を撃たれた時はだが今は今日で助かったぜって思ってるぜ。
That's the signal. The festival's gonna happen. Did you hear that earth-shattering kaboom? Okonagi had realized that he could use the festival effectively. He was going to make sure his enemies got what they deserved. On the morning of a village event, they used fireworks to let everyone know that an event is going to take place that day. This method is often used for track and field days at schools. Since Watanagashi starts in the evening, the fireworks go up at 10 a.m. The fireworks, of course, make loud explosive noises. Since Hinamizawa is located in a ravine, the sound echoes, making it hard to figure out where it's coming from. And that was an advantage for the mountain dogs. That was my next question is, wouldn't they hear the explosives coming from a different direction, maybe? But I guess not. A loud noise and a shock shook the ground like an earthquake. The explosion must have warped support beams everywhere. There was a discomforting squeaky noise and dust fell from the ceiling. It certainly was powerful. The explosion must have blown the door wide open. An explosion that took place without anyone noticing it.
さあ入って。この奥だよ。
Mion led everyone into one of the rocky caves. There was a well-hidden shaft in there. Nobody fall down. They called it a hidden well, but it was actually a very eerie vertical tunnel. They didn't have enough flashlights for everyone, so there was no way for them to see the entirety of this ominous hidden well.
こいつを降りろってのか。どこまで続いてるんだ。
だいぶ降りると途中に横穴があるの。そこを抜ければ山中の古井戸に抜けられるようになってる。ってことはそれについて一番詳しいお姉が先頭打者決定です。お先にどうぞ。私がトップ？他の誰がトップなんです？しんがりは私と葛西が務めます。早く行って。わかった。
Mion was going to volunteer to take the rear, but Mion and Shion knew instinctively. Because there were so many of them, the rear might not make it in time. Unlike the iron door at the entrance, once the enemies were inside, all they'd have to do was go through the inner doors, which were easily breakable. The route was basically a straight line. They probably won't get lost on their way. That's why Shion took the rear guard position before Mion did. After all, she was actually the older sister. Shion wanted to protect her younger sister, who was playing the older sister in this real emergency. Mion intuitively knew what Shion was thinking. Mion understood well the relationship between her sister and herself. She wasn't the only one who felt guilty for taking the older sister position. Shion felt guilty for making Mion take on the responsibility of the family head. And here, finally, was a chance for Shion to atone.
ミオンさん、武器庫の鍵を。今は開けるべき時です。
Mion silently threw over the key. Kasai and Shion took it and ran deep into the rock tunnel.
みんな聞いて。横穴まではだいたい30メートルちょっと。落ちたら底なしだよ。しかも真っ暗なんだからね。慎重に降りて。待機してる人はちゃんとはしごを照らしてあげること。
I hope Coach is gonna make it. He's probably not in great condition right now.
一度にせいぜい1人か2人しか降りられないね。私が先陣を切る。照らしてて。
ミオンさん、気をつけて。照らす人も落ちないように。
If the lights were on, they could have gone down quickly. There were actually a few light bulbs inside of the well. Of course, Mion had already checked them. It was now certain that the enemy had cut power to the basement. It was extremely dangerous to go down this well with just the little light from the flashlights. As one went down, there had to be people lighting up the way. Mion was right. She realized as she went down herself that it was almost impossible to go down the ladder without the weak light from the flashlights. The lights didn't reach all the way down. In the darkness, her feet suddenly became unsteady. Every step she took made her more nervous. It was about 30 meters to the horizontal tunnel. That's quite deep enough already. But the hidden well went deeper than that. If Mion fell, she wouldn't just injure herself. Hasn't it been 30 meters yet, she thought? She couldn't even remember exactly how long 30 meters was. Had she missed the horizontal tunnel already? At the time, she felt a cool breeze on her body. She could sense a huge hole nearby, so she took out a flashlight to light the surrounding area. She saw the black tunnel yawning before her. Mion lit up the way from below.
よっしゃ、次はリカちゃんだ。その次が監督で、次が羽生、佐藤な。どんどん降りろよ。
Irie wanted to say that he would go last, but Rene gave the order first. They couldn't get into the basement of the clinic without Irie. Without him, they couldn't rescue Tomitake. Their lives were all equally important, but at least for the moment, his was the second most vital after Rika.
気をつけてください。照らしています。
分かってる。みんなも急いで。
Rika was much shorter than Mion. She couldn't go down the ladder as easily. Her legs were too short and her left foot slipped.
大丈夫。くそ。いつまで経っても成長できない人生なんてごめんよ。私は昭和58年6月を超える。そしてね、もっともっと身長が伸びるのよ。胸だってもっと大きくなる。いつまでもこんな子供の体なんて絶対にごめんなんだから。
Though she'd been living for over 100 years, Rika was still afraid of heights. As she fought that fear, she tried to climb down as quickly as possible. After a while, the light from the top didn't reach her anymore, and Mion's light from below lit her way. Mion's light was enough. The next person could come down.
僕はもう大丈夫です。次、降りてきて。さあ、次は監督なのです。大人ならキビキリ降り遊ばせ。
わかりました。先に行きます。
The mountain dogs moved forward carefully, wearing special goggles so they could see in the dark. The one in the front noticed Satoko's trap and stopped the rest of the men.
ウグイス7よりウグイス1へワイヤー観音のトラップを発見。突入は慎重を要す。
ウグイス1了解。大鳥1トラップの痕跡少なからず通電を検討されては。
バカ野郎、そんなことしたら連中が逃げやすくなっちまうじゃねえか。向こうはこの暗闇で逃げるのもままならねえはずだ。 俺たちに有利なフィールドを最大限に使うんだ。この暗闇で追い詰めて捕らえる。これほどのでかい号だ。別に出口がきっとある。連中は隠れたりしないぞ。必ずそこから逃れようとするはずだ。突入班に火器と防弾盾、スタングレネードを与えろ。
I heard stun grenades, but I see grenades.
園崎家っていや、ヤクザの大御所だ。密輸拳銃くらいの反撃は想定しろよ。ってことは、そのワイヤートラップもクライマー程度には注意しろってことだ。全身に1000個も鉛玉食らいたくなかったらな。全身バラバラになるぞ。
了解。
Satoko's traps were effective only because they were professionals. Satoko had assumed any professionals would misinterpret her traps as more dangerous ones. That was why she ran wires everywhere. And Satoko was right. Although the mountain dogs were successful at breaking down the iron door, they hadn't even reached the torture room. However, the huge cave with the hidden well was just on the other side of the door to the torture room. It was just a matter of time before the enemy caught them.
よっしゃ、次はレナだ。
ケイチ君も急いでね。
ケイちゃん、どんな感じですか？
ああ、今レナが降りてる。割とキリキリ降りられるみたいだぞ。
はいはい、焦って落ちないようにね。その井戸、歴代園崎家に逆らった連中の死体を捨てるのに使ったって噂もある底なしの井戸だそうですから。
シオン、お前なんだよ、その持ってるの。
Shion had returned with a big machine gun in her hands. What the heck, Kate, she thought? It's one of those machine guns they use in war movies. Its defining characteristic is the way the magazine has bent forward. What's it called again? Kasai had one in his hands too. He appeared used to handling machine guns. It almost didn't look real. But it seemed like a natural fit for this surreal world lit only by flashlights. Keiichi felt like the odd one out here, since he didn't know how to use a gun. Shion and Kasai hid on opposite sides of the cave, so that they could see the entrance to the torture room. Not only Kasai, but Shion also seemed to be used to doing things like that.
シオン、その役は俺がやる。だから次はシオンが降りろ。
You don't even know how to use a
ケイちゃんの男の
gun.
プライド、サンキューです。でも、ケイちゃんにカラシニコフの説明をするより、ケイちゃんの番になったらキリキリ降りてくれる方がロスタイムは少ないです。気にしないで。いい女は死なないから。
As Shion winked at Keiichi, they heard a door being knocked down nearby. Immediately, Shion and Kasai's looks turned stern, and they took cover behind the rocks, aiming their guns into the darkness. The enemies had entered the torture room. There was a flashlight next to the door. Kasai had left it there. The mountain dogs seemed to be able to see in the darkness, even though they couldn't. So it was an improvised solution. The footsteps of the mountain dogs were growing closer. They were passing through the torture room. In other words, the door was the only thing separating them from their enemies.
ケイチ君、早く！
シオン、お前が先に降りろ。
シオンさん、
んで、ケイちゃんに譲って私だけ生き残ったら、私はお姉に一生恨まれますって。私の思い人はもういないけど、お姉にはいるもん。
は？お前、この忙しい時に何の？
死ぬ気はないけど、シオンに伝えて。私たち、また次の時も双子がいいね。
行け！
Shion yelled, telling Keiichi to move on. He didn't understand why Shion said to tell Shion. But she asked him, so he had to convey that message. Otherwise, if something terrible really happened, Shion's message would never reach Mion. An explosion shook the air. Something was thrown in from the torture room. The explosion from that and the noise from Kesai's machine gun sounded at the same time. The clamor echoed in the cave. All I can do is those violent flashes of light burn the series of images into my eyes. Is shed tears over my own intolerable powerlessness. And climb down the ladder. Mion quickly screamed from below. I descended and screamed up to the top too.
ウグイス1、攻撃を受けた。敵は隠し部屋奥の大空洞内で阻止線を展開。マズルフラッシュは2、おそらく AK だ。
集団がうまいぞ、プロだ。大鳥1、指示を行う。
Yeah, murder them.
そう来なくっちゃな。相手はプロだぞ。キリングハウスの卒業生以外は突入するな。ウグイス1、2、大鳥7、8、突入準備。火器はいくつある？
P.5 が4、各種グレネード多数。防弾盾は突撃銃には信用できない。放棄する。
入ってすぐ脇に発光した懐中電灯が落ちている。おそらく向こうは暗視装備がないものと推定。
ウグイス1だ。突入は俺たちでやる。合図と同時にスタングレネードを放り込み、突入3回。
While the enemies were quiet, Kasai changed his magazine.
シオンさん、もう十分です。行ってください。
私が抜けたら葛西が弾倉を変えている間に誰が弾幕張るんです？ツーマンステルが基本でしょ。
There's a contradiction in what Shion just said. According to her theory, the last two can never escape. Mion kept shouting from the tunnel below.
シオンのバカ！早く降りて！
Everyone knows it wasn't safe to stay. But nobody could stop Mion from screaming.
俺とミオンはここでシオンを待つ。レナはみんなを連れて裏山に逃げてくれ。
わかった。嫌よ、誰が欠けても嫌。いいか。これが最後の世界なのよ。ここで一つ後悔が残ったからもう一度やり直そうというのはもうない。私は嫌よ。シオンが死んだり葛西が死んだりする未来はごめんよ。もうやり直せないって知ってるから嫌よ。いやいや絶対嫌だからシオン早く降りてきて。
As they looked up to the top of the well, they saw a violent flash and heard a roar. That's violent. Very loud. Then they heard explosive sounds, different from the sounds of the machine guns that Shion and Kesai were using. They also heard a tinkling sound, which could have been the sound of bullet shells. They couldn't see anything other than the flashing lights. Only the noise reached them. When everything stopped, after a little silence, footsteps that didn't belong to Shion or Kesai gathered at the top of the well. They could hear hard-soled shoes kicking the bullet shells as they walked.
クリア。ウグイス1より大鳥1、銃眼を制圧。
That voice echoed down the well, and Mion and the others heard it too. They didn't know how to react. Some became speechless, some started to cry, some let out a wordless scream. They looked up the well as they waited for Shion and Kesai to come down, but there was no sign of them. A bright beam of light shone down from the top of the well. Irie grabbed Mion and Keiichi's collars and pulled them back. But they could see in the dark. They might already know that Keiichi and the others were hiding in the horizontal tunnel.
了解。試みる。聞こえるか？返事をしなくてもいい。聞け！
A guy shouted from the top of the well.
女王感染者、古出理香と診療所長、入江京介を引き渡せ。君たちは誤解している。我々は特別な風土病を撲滅するためにやってきた。今回の件は所長がある陰謀に加担している可能性があるためだ。君たちには何の関係もない。おとなしく両名を引き渡せ。
They'd already turned all the flashlights off, so nobody could tell what kind of expressions were on each other's faces. But I could sense Mion's expression distorting. And because of the darkness, Nobody knew to stop her from screaming.
人殺しよくもしよ
この少女のことか。それが問題ならば安心しろ。
Don't worry, she's
生きてい
fine.
る。気絶してるだけだ。
う生きてるってよみーちゃん
Yeah, that sounds like a lie. Mion didn't rest easy at their announcement, though, because she knew Shion's survival wouldn't help resolve the situation.
こっちの男も同じだ。生きてる。だが、両名の引き渡しを無駄に拒むなら、この二人を交渉に使わねばならないぞ。
何をする気
As Mion looked up to the top of the well in the dark, it suddenly became very bright and she saw something unbelievable. Shion was unconscious, and one of the men was holding her. He was basically sticking her body out over the edge of the well. If the man let go of Shion, she would fall to the bottom. They had no idea how far down it went. There was no way she'd survive. Shion didn't reply, but she moved just a little bit. Shion was alive. At least for the moment.
はったりだ。落とすわけねえ。
は何を根拠に言ってんの人質ってのはね2人以上いる時に限りいくらでも殺せるんだよ上にはシオンと葛西さんがいる奴はシオンを突き落としてもう一度こっちに同じ選択を迫れるんだよはったりなんかで言ってるんじゃないんだよ
Let's start with Kasai first. He seems less important to us. Mion lashed out fiercely at Keiichi. He regretted saying what he just did.
考える時間が必要なら与える。ただし、60秒経過したら最初の人質を突き落とす。
Maybe we can catch her.
よく考えて素早く決断しろ。
どうしよう
Mion was half crazed with fear and panic.
敵の狙いは私です。リカさんはすでに脱出に成功したということにして、私だけが行きましょう。それで多分許してもらえるはずです。
But we need your fingerprints. Here, cut off your hand for us really quick and give us your ID card. That plan sounded like the best idea for minimizing damage, but Rena quietly spoke up.
ダメシーちゃんたちがレナたちの逃げ出す時間を稼いでくれたんだもん監督が言ったら何のためにシーちゃん
Yeah,
たちが
kill
頑張
him.
ってくれたか
Let him die.
分かんなくなっちゃうじゃあ何シオンにしないと言うのレナあんたシオンが死んでもいいって言うのあんたねシオンはやめてくださいましミオンさん私だって胸が張り裂けそうなんですのよだってシオンさんは私のねえねえなのに
Mion started to cry as she held Satoku's head. The mountain dog's beams of light shone into the horizontal tunnel. Their eyes had grown used to the darkness, so even with a little light, they could sort of see one another. But so what? This was a desperate situation, and Mion and Satoku continued to cry. Rina bit her lower lip, trying to hold her feelings in. Irie simply looked down. And as for Rika and Hanyu, they were restless.
どうすればいいの羽生
I'm really hoping that Akasaka bursts into the scene soon and that seems to be what's been happening is right at the moment when oh crap, this is looking really bad. Then the next person bolts in. I wasn't really expecting Shion to be perfectly honest, but Akasaka's supposed to be coming by sometime soon.
どうすればいいのかわからない僕にもどうすればいいかわかりませんですあんた神様でしょなんとかしてよなんとかしてよG2力とかで敵をやっつけてシオンを助けてよ奇跡でも起こらなきゃ救えないなら起こしてよ神様のあなたが
Like Akasaka, basically.